In terms of our next session, we do like to talk a little bit about industry updates and what's happening in the world of things outside of MYOB Advanced that can sometimes impact us and our organisations. And today we just want to have a little bit of a talk through some of the legislative changes in particular that we're seeing impact across Australia and New Zealand. We are aware that we are talking to audiences in both of those jurisdictions, and also some of you might have registered businesses across both. Some of you might be aware of the Payment Times Reporting Scheme. It is a relatively new scheme that was introduced in 2021. Payment Times Reporting was really a mechanism by which the government wanted to bring transparency in terms of how larger organisations were paying smaller businesses across the economy. So for those organisations that had a total revenue in excess of $100 million, there was a requirement to essentially provide details of their payment terms through an automated interface that was supported in MYOB Advanced 2022.1 or later. Interestingly enough, as a part of the introduction of this, there was a mechanism by which there was a statutory review of the Act and the success of that Act. Most of you have not probably heard of the Payment Times Reporting Scheme portal, the information that's available from the government in terms of the Payment Times Reporting Scheme and the information that was being provided. And the statutory review just identified the fact that that legislation hasn't really been as effective as perhaps they would like, that they haven't really seen that be effective in terms of transparency for smaller organisations. At this stage, there is no change to the Act itself, but watch this space. There's certainly some awareness that it hasn't been as effective as perhaps planned, and there might be changes at some point in the future. Interestingly enough, in New Zealand, we did see the introduction of a very similar Act in 2023, the Business Payment Practices Act. Very, very similar approach. Interestingly enough, though, that Act was actually repealed in February 2024 by the new government. Essentially, they looked at Australia's success with their legislation and made the decision that the legislative approach wasn't working for Australia, so why continue down that route for the New Zealand economy? One of the things that the government pointed out was the importance of e-invoicing as a potential way of improving the flow of transactions between organisations and hopefully the payment times. So in terms of e-invoicing, we have seen this as an initiative introduced in 2019. We've talked about this at previous user groups in terms of the role of e-invoicing, but for those of you that haven't attended previously, just to give you a little bit of an update in terms of where we are at. For those of you that aren't aware, e-invoicing is essentially a mechanism by which we automate the flow of invoice transactions between organisations, between yourselves and your suppliers, yourselves and your customers. The goal of this is, in essence, to bring efficiencies across the whole vertical supply chain. The governments, both the Australian and New Zealand government, estimated 30 billion in transaction costs would be saved in that first 10 years. We've seen some great progress around the initiative. Firstly, we have seen a standard adopted, the PPOL interoperability framework. There's also been some initiatives by the Australian Commonwealth Government who mandated e-invoicing for all agencies effective 1st of July 2022. And that did actually bring some payment times efficiencies as well to those organisations that are currently engaging with Commonwealth departments on e-invoicing. Now, the other thing that we've seen is EDI vans or value-added networks take a little bit of a leading role in terms of how e-invoicing is being played out within organisations. So if you're currently working with an EDI van, we'd encourage you to reach out to them, have that conversation, and look at how you could potentially expand your EDI transactions that are currently flowing across your organisations to also include e-invoicing. We have seen some increases in terms of adoption The New Zealand IRD has some great details on their website where they identify registrations. You'll see back in March 2023, just under 7,500 registrations, increasing to just under 14,000 in March 2024. And there's also some information of a monthly e-invoicing report that they release, where they detail the amount of registration of companies that are registered and the amount of e-invoices that are being transmitted across those networks. We're not seeing quite as much information on the ATO's website, unfortunately. Last updated 3rd of November 2022. But we really do encourage you to take a hold of this initiative. It really only works if we see people on both sides take up e-invoicing as something that can add value to the organizations. We did hear Bruce talk previously about those of us that are really wanting to remove the pain of manual transactions that are being processed within our businesses. This is one great way of achieving those benefits.